Welcome to Episode 7 in the Accident Theory series. Episode 6 introduced causal investigations, focusing on what differentiates a good investigation from a bad one. We learned that while an incident report is an important component of an investigation, it should not be the sole source of data for drawing conclusions or implementing countermeasures. For an investigation to be effective, it must be useful, which requires it to be comprehensive, unbiased, efficient, and reliable. In today's episode, we will look at investigation challenges. Specifically, we will look at the premature close and unsystematic or idiosyncratic investigation. We will also look at preconception of cause. When conducting a causal investigation, steps are taken to determine whether the individual involved in the incident made an error that led to injury or another adverse outcome. One of the key distinctions between human reasoning and machine logic is that humans can sometimes forget a step in a process or fail to recognize deficiencies in safeguards meant to protect them. Humans are prone to making decisions with incomplete information and often opt for the quickest solution rather than the most appropriate one. A common example of a human skipping safe steps is using a butter knife instead of searching for a slotted screwdriver hidden in a toolbox. While the butter knife may accomplish the task, it is an error because it introduces additional hazards.
Remember the phrase, errare humanum est, which translates from Latin as, to err is human.
This old Latin expression highlights that mistakes are an inherent part of human nature. However, it is equally important to recognize that investigators are also human, and despite their expertise, they are not infallible when conducting an investigation. In Episode 6, we explored the 4 key aspects that define a good and useful investigation. Those aspects were comprehensiveness, impartiality, efficiency, and reliability. While investigators strive to meet these standards, challenges can arise that must be recognized and addressed to ensure the investigation remains objective and effective. One of the challenges to being comprehensive is the risk of jumping to conclusions too quickly. If an investigator has a limited reasoning process, they may rely on known risk factors and simple explanations rather than conducting a thorough inquiry. When investigators focus only on a few easily identifiable factors, they risk closing the investigation too soon, leaving unknown causal or contributing factors undiscovered. A more comprehensive investigation provides a stronger foundation for implementing countermeasures that effectively prevent recurrence. Remaining unbiased is another major challenge, as bias is an inherent part of human nature. It can intrude on every stage of the investigation, from evidence collection and witness interviews to the final report. Bias often stems from pre-existing opinions or knowledge, which can influence an investigator's judgment, whether the information is factual or misleading. This can lead to premature closure, where an investigator ends an investigation before fully understanding the incident, ultimately compromising its accuracy. Efficiency is also a crucial factor, and investigations can become inefficient when excessive time and resources are spent on low-value inquiries. If an investigator follows an unsystematic approach or focuses on irrelevant or non-causal factors, valuable time and effort are wasted. This energy could have been better used to identify meaningful information that adds value to the investigation. Maintaining a structured and systematic approach ensures that time is spent wisely, leading to more effective outcomes. The reliability of an investigator is, in many ways, a culmination of being comprehensive, unbiased, and efficient. If an investigator reaches unclear or vague conclusions, they fail to provide useful findings that can support specific countermeasures. Unstructured or incomplete data not only hinders the effectiveness of corrective actions, but also jeopardizes the comprehensiveness of the investigation. If bias or gaps in data arise, the investigation's reliability is diminished, making it less effective in preventing future incidents. Although efficiency is a key aspect of a good investigation, being too efficient can also create challenges. Over-efficiency can result from an investigator's biases, leading them to jump to conclusions without conducting a comprehensive analysis of all available facts. Concluding an investigation too early is known as a premature close, meaning the investigation has not fully gone through the natural process of data collection and analysis. An investigation is not an endless process. It cannot continue indefinitely. However, determining whether an investigation has reached a logical conclusion or has been closed prematurely can be difficult, especially when not every fact and detail is known. For an investigator to end an investigation at the right time, they must be satisfied that they fully understand the event, be able to explain the event in detail to others, and be able to justify the recommended remedy to prevent recurrence. The challenge of knowing when to stop an investigation is based not only on the investigator's skill, but also on their innate temperament. Temperament influences subconscious decision-making, shaping how an investigator interprets evidence and determines when an investigation is complete. Temperament also impacts which aspects of an incident the investigator prioritizes in their inquiry. For example, consider two investigators analyzing the same workplace injury. If they come from contrasting backgrounds, their role-based perspectives may cause them to interpret the incident differently. A mechanical engineer may focus on the interaction between the worker and the equipment, seeking technical causes for the failure. Meanwhile, a human resources professional might explore administrative and psychological factors, considering whether workplace policies or employee behavior contributed to the incident. The purpose of this comparison is not to determine which investigator is more skilled, but rather to highlight how different perspectives shape the interpretation of an incident and, ultimately, its conclusions. The premature close presents a paradox. On the one hand, an investigator should keep investigating until all relevant facts have been gathered. On the other hand, as previously discussed, an investigation cannot continue indefinitely, so there must be guidelines to determine when it has reached a logical stopping point. Even if an investigator fully understands the event, can explain it clearly, and has implemented corrective measures, can they say with absolute certainty that they have uncovered everything there is to know about the incident? This paradox of knowing when to stop can be compared to the causality dilemma of what came first, the chicken or the egg, where an inquiry can continue tracing backward indefinitely, potentially wasting time and resources without significant progress. Danish researcher Jens Rasmussen developed a basic set of stop rules to determine how far an investigator should trace causal chains. According to Rasmussen, an investigation should stop when there is no more relevant information to collect, a familiar or abnormal event is found to be a reasonable explanation, and finally, when a remedy is available for the identified cause. These three basic stop rules can be applied to most investigations. These stop rules can be compared to practicing math problems in school. When solving a problem, how does one decide when to keep working on it or move on to the next question? This decision is easier when an answer or hint is provided. If a solution matches the expected answer or hints, it is accepted, and the next problem can be attempted. However, if problem solving stops as soon as a plausible explanation is found, without exploring other possibilities, the investigation risks being biased toward human error conclusions. Human error is a common explanation in investigations because causal chains almost always involve human involvement, whether it be an operator, manager, or designer. Investigators often perceive human error as a reasonable conclusion since it is easier to identify compared to mechanical failure, which may require a more detailed investigation or disassembly of equipment. Additionally, addressing human error is often less resource-intensive than restructuring an entire process or investing in new equipment. In modern occupational health and safety discussions, professionals often shift responsibility away from workers and instead focus on managerial or design failures when analyzing incidents. However, even this perspective is still considered a form of human error, as managers and designers are human too. Ultimately, recognizing the limitations of human-centered conclusions and ensuring that investigations consider all possible contributing factors is key to avoiding premature closure and implementing effective solutions. Should an investigation determine potential human error or equipment error first? Which aspect of the investigation should be given priority? Share your thoughts in this episode's group chat or in the comments section if you are following on social media. When an investigation is systematic, it follows a structured plan and a methodical approach, ensuring that it is both comprehensive and efficient. In contrast, an unsystematic or idiosyncratic approach can weaken the quality and usefulness of an investigation. One common idiosyncratic behavior that affects investigation outcomes is the premature fixation on a hypothesis. Investigators may quickly settle on an explanation for an event and halt further inquiry, preventing a full extraction of necessary information. When a lack of a systematic approach is paired with limited subject knowledge, an investigator may rely on what they perceive as common-sense explanations rather than fact-based analysis. This jumping to conclusions method results in an incomplete investigation, where the depth of analysis varies depending on who conducts it and whether they are truly able to diagnose the problem. Investigators may be tempted to stop prematurely when they encounter patterns of evidence that resemble something familiar or easy to fix. Once a plausible explanation is found, there is a tendency to declare the investigation complete, without considering that multiple contributing factors may exist. Additionally, unsystematic investigation routines can develop when investigators expect meaningful questions and insights to emerge spontaneously during the inquiry. At the opposite extreme, following the exact same set of questions for every investigation, regardless of the event, can be equally inefficient. A balance must be struck between structured inquiry and flexibility in questioning based on the specifics of the incident. The ideal approach to causal investigation begins by establishing a clear understanding of the incident structure and its outcome. This provides context before identifying deviations and factual causes. A systematic approach ensures that every relevant aspect is carefully examined. In contrast, an investigation without a structured methodology relies on guesswork, where investigators randomly choose questions in hopes of uncovering key details. While some relevant factors may be identified, this method risks producing fragmented data, leading to an incomplete or misleading analysis. Although human nature is a factor in determining how an investigator views a problem, this part of the human thought process can be retrained to look for alternative causes and factors. Many investigators enter an investigation with preconceived ideas about incident causation, often referred to as a worldview, which can influence their approach and findings. These conscious and unconscious biases lead investigators to pursue certain lines of inquiry, sometimes regardless of whether the facts justify those questions. For example, a safety specialist may strongly believe that hazard awareness and safety training in the workplace is inadequate. As a result, they may focus disproportionately on factors related to training deficiencies, even if the root cause of the incident lies elsewhere. Reflecting back to Episode 6, we learned about when an investigation can be ideal, sufficient, or fail. A safety specialist who believes that there is insufficient training in the workplace is not technically wrong, because there is often room for improvement in workplace safety training. However, allowing this preconceived belief to dominate the investigation may cause the investigator to overlook other critical contributing factors. Since the evidence may appear to confirm their existing belief, but they have failed to fully explore alternative causes, the investigation would not be considered as ideal. As Abraham Maslow famously said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. This tendency to jump to conclusions based on preconceptions can prevent a full and accurate understanding of the facts, leading to ineffective or incomplete remedies. Preconceptions in investigations often fall into common patterns of assigning fault to a worker, assigning fault to management, assigning fault to communication, or simply placing fault on bad luck. Worker preconceptions are questions that are asked to place responsibility on the worker. These questions can include asking if the worker was not paying attention. Was the worker intoxicated? Was the worker rushing to complete the task? Was the worker not trained or qualified? Was the worker not using the right tools? Was the worker tired? Management preconceptions are questions that are asked to place responsibility on the management of an organization. These questions can include asking if the management forced the workers to rush. Did management not provide the proper tools? Did management mislead the workers about the hazards of the work? Did management know about hazards but did not correct them to save money? Did management not train the workers? Was management not aware of conditions in the workplace? Communication preconception really only comes from asking two questions. Was information not communicated between all parties, or was information withheld by one party? The final preconception can sometimes be an outlying factor, and that has to do with luck. Though we have stressed multiple times in this learning series that luck does not have a place in incident investigation, some people look at an incident with a perceived perversity of the universe, or that someone is just simply having a bad day. A causal explanation for an event can never be fully determined if certain factors are never questioned. When an investigator focuses only on preconceived factors, their conclusions will almost certainly be limited to that narrow set of possibilities. While some of these factors may indeed be valid contributors, there is no guarantee that more critical causes have not been overlooked. A preconceived notion of causation can also arise from false pattern recognition during an investigation. Patterns can be easily identified or even artificially constructed by combining data from unrelated sources. This tendency is like hypochondria, where a person's symptoms seem to perfectly match a severe diagnosis, leading them to ignore other, more likely explanations. If an investigation fails to explore contradictory evidence, the conclusion becomes the product of a false hypothesis rather than factual analysis. A real-world example of how preconceptions influence perception occurred during the coronavirus pandemic between 2020 and 2022. The symptoms of COVID-19 closely resembled those of the common cold, flu, or seasonal allergies, yet public panic and precautionary protocols led many to assume the worst-case scenario. Even though less severe illnesses were still common, mandatory isolation and testing protocols were required for anyone experiencing COVID-like symptoms. This societal response highlights how preconceived fears and expectations can shape decision-making, even when alternative explanations exist. In Episode 7, we learned that people sometimes make decisions without all the required information, and sometimes choose to reach the outcome of the decision in the quickest way possible. Bias is created when an investigator has accumulated opinions or knowledge to which they were exposed. If an investigator reaches conclusions that are not useful, or if the explanation becomes too vague to support specific countermeasures, the investigator is not compiling a useful investigation and can be considered as unreliable. Concluding an investigation too early is referred to as a premature close, as the investigation has not run through a natural data collecting and analyzing process. An investigator should keep investigating until all facts have been gathered that are relevant to the incident. However, an investigation cannot continue into infinity, and stop rules can determine if an investigation has concluded. When an investigation is systematic, it follows a fixed plan and is methodical in nature. Many investigators have a preconceived idea, sometimes referred to as a worldview, of incident causation that can influence their investigations. COHSI provides its students with a multiple-choice quiz at the end of each episode, which can be used as practice material for the content that has been covered. A free version of the quiz can be accessed by anyone following our content on social media by using the QR code shown on the screen. If you are a COHSI student, please complete the discussion board topics found throughout this unit, as well as the episode quiz. Both of these tasks can be found under their appropriate tabs in your learning portal. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to your course instructor. Thank you for watching and have a safe day.